AITA for getting my coworker fired over an inappropriate public joke to my wife. My name is Blake, I'm 35, and until last summer, I had a pretty boring life exactly the way I liked it. I worked as a senior operations analyst for a mid-sized medical device company in Columbus, Ohio, rented a townhouse with my wife, Noelle, and spent most weeknights trying to keep our dog, Murphy, from eating socks while Noelle graded essays at the kitchen table. We'd been married 4 years, together for 7, and the biggest recurring argument in our house used to be whether my coffee habit counted as a grocery expense or a personality flaw. Our townhouse sat in one of those quiet suburban developments where every garage was full of half-finished projects and every mailbox was grouped at the same little station by the entrance. We had a tiny back patio with 2 folding chairs, a grill I kept promising to clean, and a ceramic planter Noelle insisted was coming back, even though the basil inside it had surrendered weeks earlier. It was not glamorous. It was ours. Work was the same way. Not exciting, but steady. The company supplied medical device components and related equipment to hospitals, clinics, and outpatient surgery centers across several states. It was the kind of American office with badge readers at the main entrance and elevator bank, Keurig machines that always had every flavor except the one you wanted, stale birthday cupcakes in the break room, and conference rooms named after local landmarks no one had actually visited since childhood. I was good at my job because I liked puzzles better than drama. Shipping delays, vendor exceptions, cost center mismatches, and inventory problems that somehow involved 3 departments and 1 panicked warehouse supervisor. I could usually untangle them without turning every email into a small war. That made me useful to a lot of people, including Maren from procurement. Maren was 33, sharp, funny, and weirdly good at getting stubborn vendors to call her back. She could make a freight rep admit a mistake in under 10 minutes and still have them thanking her by the end of the call. We worked together often because procurement handled vendor relationships and operations handled the consequences when those relationships went sideways. For a while, I liked working with her. She was quick. She caught details. She remembered which vendor rep had a kid graduating and which one preferred phone calls over email. In an office full of people who typed circle back like it was a nervous tick, Maren seemed refreshingly human. Then she started calling me her work husband. The first time, it happened in the break room while I was trying to make coffee from a Keurig pod called Cinnamon Roll Surprise, which tasted exactly like regret. Maren walked in, saw me sorting through a stack of vendor packets, and said, "There's my work husband, doing all the boring stuff so I don't have to." The warehouse supervisor standing by the fridge laughed. Linda, my manager, laughed too. I gave the awkward little smile people give when they do not want to make a harmless joke weird. A few days later, Maren corrected herself. "Actually," she said during a Zoom call with a packaging vendor, "I'm Blake's work wife." "That's better. I run the household." The vendor rep laughed. Linda laughed again. Someone put a little bride emoji in Slack. I should have shut it down then. I know that now. At the time, I told myself it was just office noise. People used dumb nicknames. People made jokes because work was repetitive and nobody wanted to talk about quarterly metrics all day. Noelle heard it for the first time on a Tuesday evening when I was making tacos and checking Slack on my phone. Maren had posted in our vendor escalation channel, "Can someone tell my work husband to approve the Northline adjustment before I start withholding affection?" Noelle was reaching for plates in the cabinet. She saw my face, then looked at the phone. "Work husband," she said. I locked the screen too fast, which did not help. "It's just an office joke," I said. Noelle set the plates down carefully. She teaches 11th grade English, and she has a teacher's way of pausing that makes you feel like your answer is about to be graded. "Does she call other people that?" "No," I said. "I mean, not that I know of." "Do you call her anything like that?" "No." "Then it's not really mutual." I leaned against the counter and tried to sound reasonable. "Noelle, it's annoying, but it's not serious." She looked at me for a second. "Then it should be easy to stop." That was the first time she said it. It would not be the last. I did not stop it. Not really. I did what conflict-avoidant people do when they want credit for action without risking discomfort. I laughed less. I stopped responding when Maren used the nickname in Slack. Once, when she said, "My work wife is abandoning me for a warehouse call," I said, "Just Blake is fine." She put a hand over her heart and said, "Wow, so formal. We're in trouble, everybody. People laughed, and I let the moment pass because correcting her again would have made the room uncomfortable. That was my mistake. I thought discomfort was a sign I was overreacting. I did not understand that some people count on that. The real problem started at the annual company picnic. Every summer, the company rented an indoor-outdoor event space on the north side of Columbus, the kind with exposed beams, a patio, a patch of grass for cornhole, and a parking lot that made everyone's cars look dusty. Families were invited. There were folding tables with plastic tablecloths, barbecue trays under heat lamps, lemonade dispensers, raffle baskets, a bounce house for kids, and a leadership speech about teamwork that lasted exactly 4 minutes longer than anyone wanted. Noelle came with me because spouses were invited, and honestly, I wanted her there. I wanted her to meet the people I spent 40 hours a week with. I wanted her to see that Marin was loud and dramatic with everybody, not some secret threat hiding in my workday. On the drive over, Noelle wore a blue sundress and held a covered dish of pasta salad on her lap like it was evidence. I remember that because Murphy had tried to get into it before we left, and she had pointed at him and said, "You already ate one sock this week. You are not expanding your crimes." When we got to the picnic, everything seemed normal at first. Linda hugged Noelle like they knew each other better than they did. Sanjay from IT gave me a nod from the shade and told Noelle, "I hear you're the reason Blake knows what a semicolon is." Noelle smiled. "I try, but he resists punctuation." Marin arrived 20 minutes later in white jeans and a sleeveless green top, carrying a tray of cookies that looked bakery-made, but had been transferred to a home container for plausible deniability. She spotted us immediately. "Noelle," she said too brightly. "Finally, I've heard so much about you." Noelle stood and shook her hand. "Same." There was a tiny pause after that. Not hostile, just enough for me to notice. Marin turned to me and said, "Blake, you didn't tell me she was this pretty." Rude. I forced a laugh. Noelle did not. For about 20 minutes, I thought we were going to survive the afternoon. We ate pulled pork sandwiches and 2 sweet coleslaw. Noelle talked to Sanjay about his daughter's robotics club. I helped carry extra chairs from a storage closet. Marin floated around the room like she was hosting the event herself, loud but not unbearable. Then the raffle started. Marin volunteered to help announce prize numbers. She had a wireless mic, a plastic cup of lemonade, and the confidence of someone who had never once asked herself, "Should I maybe not?" She gave away a grilling basket, a movie night basket, and a gift card to a local restaurant. Then she shuffled the tickets, looked directly at our table, and said, "Before the next prize, can we get a round of applause for Blake, who keeps this place from burning down?" People clapped. I gave the awkward half-wave people give when they want applause to stop. Marin smiled wider. "Noelle, you are so lucky," she said into the mic, "but don't worry. I only get him Monday through Friday." The table went quiet in that horrible way where people are still smiling because their faces have not caught up to the room. Noelle's hand froze around her iced tea. Marin laughed and added, "Office marriage is still a marriage, right?" A few people chuckled because they did not know what else to do. Linda looked down at her plate. Sanjay stared at the raffle tickets like they had personally disappointed him. I felt heat climb up my neck. I should have stood up right there and said, "That's inappropriate." I should have looked at my wife first, not the room. Instead, I sat there for one long second, trapped between embarrassment and the old reflex to keep things smooth. Then Marin moved on to the next raffle prize like she had not just taken a private discomfort and held it up under fluorescent lighting. Noelle did not say anything for the rest of the event. She stayed polite. That was worse. She congratulated raffle winners. She thanked Linda for inviting families. She put our empty plates in the trash. When we got into the car, she buckled her seatbelt, set her purse on her lap, and looked out the passenger window. I pulled out of the parking lot slowly. "I'm sorry," I said. She did not turn toward me. "For what?" "For what she said." Noelle nodded once, still watching the road. "I have been telling you this is disrespectful for months." "I know." "No," she said, and her voice stayed calm. "You knew I didn't like it. That is different." That sentence landed harder than anything she could have shouted. We drove past a gas station, a strip mall, a church with a changeable sign, all the ordinary Columbus scenery that had no idea my stomach was folding in on itself. "I didn't think she'd say something like that in front of you," I said. "That's the problem, Blake. You were waiting for her to embarrass me enough before you decided it counted. I opened my mouth, then closed it. 1 minute later, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down at a text from Noelle, even though she was sitting right next to me. I'm not mad that she embarrassed me. I'm mad that you let me be surprised. She had sent it because she knew I would read it later and not be able to pretend I had misunderstood. The next Monday, I asked Marin to meet me in a small conference room before our stand-up. It was one of the rooms named after a local park, with a glass wall facing the hallway and a door that never latched right. I kept the door cracked because, for the first time, I was thinking like someone who had waited too long to set boundaries. Marin came in holding her laptop and a travel mug. Are we having a serious meeting? She asked. Should I be scared? I stayed standing. The joke at the picnic crossed a line. Her smile twitched. What joke? The Monday through Friday comment. The office marriage comment. The work wife thing needs to stop. She stared at me for a second, then smiled like I had said something adorable. Wow, she said. Did Noelle write that for you? No. I'm saying it. Her smile dropped. I kept my voice even. No nickname. No comments about my marriage. No possessive jokes. I should have said it clearly earlier, and I'm saying it now. Marin looked toward the cracked door, then back at me. You're really going to act like I invented all of this by myself? That should have scared me more than it did. I'm not debating it, I said. I'm setting a boundary. She laughed once, without humor. Okay, Blake. Then she walked out. By lunch, she was cold to me. By Tuesday, people were acting weird around me. The warehouse supervisor who usually stopped by my desk to complain about shipping labels suddenly sent short emails instead. A finance analyst named Jordan asked if I was doing okay, but in a tone that suggested he had already heard why I might not be. By Wednesday afternoon, Linda called me into her office. Linda was 52, practical, and conflict avoidant in the polished way managers become when they have survived too many staff meetings. Her office had a framed print of the Columbus skyline, 2 fake plants, and a mug that said Chaos Coordinator. She shut the door. I wanted to check in, she said. Have you handled the Marin situation with sensitivity? I sat down slowly. What does that mean? Linda folded her hands. She feels embarrassed. She embarrassed my wife in front of half the company. Linda's face tightened. I understand that, but she feels like you encouraged closeness and then punished her publicly for it. I spoke to her privately. Blake, perception matters. There it was. Not truth. Perception. I felt that old urge to explain everything at once. I wanted to tell Linda about Noelle's texts, the months of comments, the way Marin had ignored every smaller attempt to redirect her. But Linda already looked tired. She wanted this to be a misunderstanding she could file under interpersonal friction. So I said, the boundary stands. Linda sighed. Just don't let it affect vendor workflows. At the time, that sounded like a generic manager sentence. A week after the picnic, I started getting strange little signs that something bigger was off. It was a Thursday morning, and I was at my desk trying to fix a delayed shipment issue for a clinic in Dayton when an email came in from Northline Supply. Subject, thanks for quick turnaround. The message was short. Blake, appreciate you turning the approval around so quickly. This keeps the expedited shipment on track. Derek said to pass along his thanks too. I stared at it. Northline was a specialty supplier we used for hard-to-source packaging components. They were expensive, irritating, and occasionally necessary. I had worked with them before, but I did not remember approving anything for them that week. I searched my inbox and found an auto-generated approval confirmation from the previous Thursday at 2:14 p.m. The previous Thursday at 2:14 p.m., I had been in a dentist chair with a plastic suction tube hooked inside my cheek, while a hygienist told me I was a little tense. I knew that because I still had the appointment reminder card in my cup holder, and because half my face had been numb until dinner. At first, I assumed I had approved something earlier, and the system delayed the email. That happens sometimes. Our approval platform had the personality of a vending machine that ate dollar bills. Then I opened the attachment. Expedited freight adjustment. Northline Supply. $18,700. That was not impossible, but it was high enough that I would have remembered it. Anything above $10,000 had to be tied to a cost center and a documented business reason. This one had my username, my cost center, and my workstation ID. I sat there staring at the screen. Around me, the office kept moving. Someone laughed near the printer. A Keurig hissed. A half-empty box of birthday cupcakes sat on the break room counter under a sticky note that said, "Please take." I heard Noelle's voice in my head. Then it should be easy to stop. Only this was not about a nickname anymore. I did not go to Linda first. That was probably the smartest decision I made in the whole thing. I went to Sanjay. Sanjay was 41, the IT security lead, and the only person I knew who could make a policy reminder sound like a threat and a kindness at the same time. We ate lunch together sometimes because neither of us enjoyed pretending leftover pizza in the break room was a social event. I found him in the small kitchenette near IT, stirring powdered creamer into coffee he did not seem to want. "Can I ask you something without asking for a favor?" I said. He looked at me over his glasses. "That is the correct opening sentence." I told him I believed an approval had been submitted from my workstation while I was off-site. I did not mention Marin. I did not mention the picnic. I kept it clean. Sanjay held up one finger. "Never ask IT for a favor. Ask us for a policy-compliant explanation." "Fine," I said. "I would like a policy-compliant explanation. Open a ticket. Include the timestamp, approval ID, and where you were. Do not speculate. Do not accuse. Do not forward it to 5 people with question marks." "I can do that." He paused. "Also, Blake." "Yeah. Lock your screen every time you leave." "I do." He gave me a look. "Most of the time," I said. He nodded like that was the answer he expected and hated. I opened the ticket. 1 hour later, Sanjay stopped by my desk carrying a coffee he did not drink. "Hypothetically," he said, "if a person left the building at 1:01 p.m. and did not badge back in, and an approval occurred at 2:14 p.m. from that person's workstation, the first question would be whether there was a remote session." And hypothetically, there was not. My mouth went dry. He continued, carefully. "There was also no VPN session tied to your account during that window. The approval system had an active session from your workstation. It should have timed out sooner. It did not. So someone used my computer. I am not saying that in an official capacity to you in the aisle. Right. But you are not crazy for opening a ticket." That was all he could say. It was enough. I asked, "Can you see who was near my desk?" Sanjay's expression did not change, but his eyes shifted toward the badge reader by the elevator bank. "Compliance can request badge logs," he said. "HR can request them. I cannot hand you a printed report because you are worried, even if you are reasonably worried." "Okay." He took one step away, then stopped. "Keep your communication clean," he said. "No hallway theories." That night, I got home before Noel. Murphy met me at the door with one of my dress socks in his mouth and the guilty posture of a dog who had already made peace with consequences. I traded him a treat for the sock and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the approval record until Noel came in carrying a tote bag full of essays. She took one look at me and said, "What happened?" I told her everything. The email, the approval, the dentist appointment, Sanjay, the badge logs he could not officially give me, my workstation, Northline. I expected her to be angry about Marin. She was, but not in the way I expected. She put her tote bag down, opened her laptop, and pulled up a blank document. "We are going to write down dates," she said. I blinked. "We?" She looked at me over her glasses. "Blake, you were slow. You were not evil. There is a difference. But from now on, you are done being vague." So we built a timeline. The first, work husband, joke in the break room. The Slack message where Marin called herself my work wife. The vendor lunches Marin insisted we both attend. The day she told me she had fixed my calendar and moved a Northline review because you would have forgotten anyway. The afternoon I came back from a warehouse call and found her sitting at my desk, spinning slowly in my chair. Back then, she had laughed and said, "I'm just stealing your chair because mine is squeaky." I had laughed too. I hated remembering that. We added the picnic, the private boundary conversation, the weirdness afterward, Linda's Perception Matters meeting, the Northline approval. Noelle typed while I talked. Her face stayed focused, but I could see the tension in her jaw. Then she asked, "Why Northline?" "They're a specialty supplier." "Specialty how?" "Packaging components, mostly. Stuff that gets annoying when there are shortages." "Who is Derek?" I frowned. "What?" The email said Derek passed along his thanks. I searched my inbox. Derek Calloway, Northline Operations Consultant. Noelle went still. "What?" I said. "Marin's maiden name," she said. "Do you know it?" I did not. That was the kind of thing I might have known if I had ever cared about office gossip, but I usually tuned out wedding photos and baby announcements unless there was cake involved. Noelle started searching public state business records. She teaches English, but she has the research instincts of a bloodhound when someone annoys her. Within 20 minutes, she found Northline's registered agent. That led to a holding company. The holding company listed an address. The address matched a landscaping business outside Grove City. The landscaping business had a Facebook page. In a photo from a holiday party, Marin stood beside a man in a gray sweater. He was tagged as Derek Calloway. Marin's maiden name was Calloway. I leaned back in my chair, feeling cold. Noelle turned the laptop toward me. This could be nothing. It is not nothing. No, she said quietly. It is probably not nothing. For a few seconds, the only sound was Murphy chewing something in the living room. I got up, checked, and took one dish towel from him without even scolding. He looked disappointed in both of us. The old version of me would have marched into Linda's office the next morning with half a story and a full panic attack. The new version of me listened when Noelle said, "Do not argue with someone who performs for a living. Bring receipts." So I stopped reacting. When Marin made little comments near the break room like, "Careful, Blake might report you to his wife," I did not respond. When Jordan from finance asked if things were weird at home, I said, "Noelle and I are fine. Please don't repeat personal gossip." He looked embarrassed and said, "Yeah, sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "No," I said. "You shouldn't have." It felt strange to say that. Not angry, just direct. When Linda asked if I could smooth things over with Marin before the quarterly vendor review, I said, "I'm not comfortable having one-on-one meetings with her right now. Please keep communication in writing." Linda stared at me like I had handed her a live raccoon. "Blake, that feels a little rigid." "It is clear. That's not always the same as helpful. It is in this case." That sentence changed everything. Marin did not like writing. She liked hallway comments. She liked jokes that vanished into the air. She liked saying things with 3 possible meanings and making people feel rude for asking which one she intended. So I made everything email or Slack. When she asked me to review another Northline adjustment, I replied in the project channel and tagged Linda. "Please send the full invoice packet, freight documentation, and vendor conflict of interest disclosure before I review." Marin reacted with a thumbs-up emoji. Then, 5 minutes later, she walked to my desk. "You're making this so much bigger than it needs to be," she said quietly. I kept my hands on my keyboard. "Please put any work questions in the channel." She leaned down just enough that anyone watching would think we were discussing a spreadsheet. "You really want people looking at your messages?" My skin prickled. That was the first time she slipped. I looked up at her. "Yes." For 1 second, her expression hardened. Then she smiled and straightened. "Okay," she said brightly. "Whatever makes you comfortable." After she walked away, I opened a new document and typed the time, date, and exactly what she said. Then I sent myself an email with the same note, because Sanjay's voice was now permanently installed in my head telling me not to be sloppy. 2 days later, HR responded to my formal concern. "We are confirming receipt of your formal concern and will coordinate with compliance regarding the access review. Please preserve relevant communications and avoid direct confrontation while the review is pending." The email came from Erica, our HR business partner. Erica was 45, careful, procedural, and allergic to words that sounded too definite before an investigation was complete. Our first conversation was polite in the way airport announcements are polite. "I understand this has been stressful," she said. "It has. We'll need to look at this from all sides." "I understand. We want to be careful not to conflate interpersonal discomfort with policy violations." I took a breath. "That makes sense. I'm not asking you to investigate a nickname. I'm asking you to investigate an approval submitted from my workstation while I was off-site, involving a vendor connected to a coworker who had access to my desk and repeatedly framed that access as normal." There was a pause. Erica said, "Please send me the timeline." I did. After that, things moved slowly but not backward. Compliance contacted Sanjay. Finance pulled Northline invoices. Linda became extremely interested in using neutral language. Marin continued acting like she was the injured party, but she had to do it with less room to improvise. The quarterly vendor review happened 2 weeks later in the big conference room, the one with glass walls and a video screen that never connected on the first try. It was called AITA, because apparently naming rooms after rivers made budget discussions less depressing. Leadership attended because Northline had become an expensive vendor. Procurement was there. Finance was there. Linda was there. HR was there because I had filed a formal concern. Compliance was there because Sanjay's ticket had turned into a real investigation. Sanjay sat at the far end of the table with a laptop open and the expression of a man wishing everyone had simply locked their screens. Maren arrived like she was walking into a brunch reservation. White blazer, perfect hair, laptop under one arm. If she was nervous, she did not show it. Before the meeting started, she came over to my side of the table. "Blake," she said loudly enough for nearby people to hear. "Are we okay? I hate that your personal life has made work so tense." It was a beautiful little sentence. Polite on the surface, poison underneath. A month earlier, I would have defended myself immediately and looked guilty doing it. This time, I just said, "I'm here for the vendor review." Her smile held, but her eyes changed. For the first 20 minutes, Maren ran the room. She had slides. She had charts. She had a clean little story about supply chain volatility, urgent clinic needs, and Northline's willingness to step up when other vendors could not. She framed them as difficult but necessary. She also made sure to mention, twice, that I had personally approved their largest adjustments. Then the finance director, a woman named Patrice who never wasted words, tapped her pen against a printed packet. "Let's look at the $18,700 expedited freight charge," she said. Maren clicked to a slide with my approval screenshot already embedded. "There's Blake's sign-off," she said. "I know there's been some confusion lately, but the approval trail is clear." The room shifted toward me. Erica looked down at her notes, then at me. "Blake," she said, "do you dispute approving this?" "Yes." Maren gave a tiny laugh, like she felt sorry for me. "Blake." I opened my folder. "I was at a dental appointment when that approval was submitted," I said. "My appointment began at 1:30 p.m. on Bethel Road. I have the appointment receipt and reminder card. My badge records show I left the building at 1 p.m. and did not return that afternoon. The approval was submitted from my workstation at 2:14 p.m. I opened an IT security ticket the same day I found it." The room went quiet. Maren said, "That's ridiculous. Maybe he approved it remotely." Sanjay did not look up from his laptop. There was no remote session. Maren blinked. Compliance asked, "Were you on the operations floor between 2:09 and 2:17 p.m. that day?" Maren looked insulted. "I don't memorize every time I walk around the office." Sanjay said, "Badge logs show you entered the elevator bank for that floor at 2:09 and exited at 2:17. Maren's face changed for 1 second. Not a lot. Just enough. Then she recovered. "This is insane," she said. "Everyone knows Blake and I worked closely. I helped him all the time. He asked me to." There it was. The story she had been building for months. I said, "That is why I brought documentation. Noelle had told me not to make it personal first. Start with work facts. Stay boring. Boring wins." I connected my laptop to the screen. It took 2 tries, because of course it did. When the display finally came up, I opened the timeline. I showed the Slack messages first. Not the most embarrassing ones. The relevant ones. "Maren, I'll just camp at Blake's desk until he approves Northline." "Maren, work-wife privileges include calendar control. Sorry, I don't make the rules." "Maren, if Blake disappears, send Northline to me and I'll make sure it gets handled." I showed the email where she had written, "Derek says Northline can eat the rush fee if we need to make it look cleaner," followed 2 minutes later by, "Sorry, wrong thread." I showed the vendor onboarding document listing Derek Calloway as Northline's operations consultant. I showed the public business records connecting Derek to the same holding company tied to Northline's registered agent. I showed the social media tag that connected Derek to Maren's family, carefully, without making it look like a conspiracy board. I showed my dentist receipt. I showed the IT ticket number. I showed my written boundary message after the picnic. I showed my request that all future Northline communication stay in writing. I did not raise my voice. That was the best part. I just kept clicking. Maren looked at Linda. "You're letting him do this?" she said. "After everything he put me through?" Linda looked like she wanted the carpet to open and swallow her rolling chair. Erica folded her hands on the table. "Maren," she said, "do you have a familial relationship with Derek Calloway?" Maren opened her mouth, closed it. Nobody moved. It took maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I don't see how that's relevant, Marin said. Patrice from finance said, it is extremely relevant. Compliance ended the meeting right there. Marin was placed on administrative leave before lunch. She walked out carrying her laptop bag and staring straight ahead while the office pretended not to watch. People always pretend not to watch. They watch anyway. Derek's company contract was frozen by the end of the day. The next week was a blur of interviews, locked accounts, careful emails, and people suddenly remembering they had seen things. HR interviewed half the department. IT pulled badge logs, workstation access records, approval timestamps, and deleted Slack messages. Finance reviewed every Northline invoice Marin had touched. Compliance asked questions that made several managers sit up straighter. I had to answer for my part too. That surprised me, even though it should not have. Compliance asked whether I had ever given Marin my password. I had not. They asked whether I allowed her to use my workstation. I said no, then corrected myself. I told them she had sat at my desk before, that I had not treated it seriously enough, that I could not swear my screen was locked every single time I stepped away months earlier. That was not a fun conversation. It was an honest one. The final number was not millions like some streaming documentary. It was a little over $63,000 in inflated or unsupported charges. Big enough to matter. Small enough that she probably thought nobody would burn down their own comfort to look closely. Marin was fired for cause. Derek's company lost the contract and was referred to outside counsel. I never found out exactly what happened after that, and eventually I stopped needing that information to feel okay. Linda got written up and moved off direct management of procurement-related workflows. She sent me an apology email in the careful language of someone who had HR review it twice. Blake, I regret that I did not respond more appropriately when you raised concerns. I should have created a clearer path for escalation and documentation. I read it 3 times. Then I replied, thank you. I appreciate the apology. I did not add warmth I did not feel. I did not add punishment either. The office changed in the way offices do. Not all at once. Not nobly. For about a month, people treated me like a walking compliance training. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Someone removed the bride emoji from the Slack custom reactions. The break room cupcakes continued to be stale. The Keurig still betrayed everyone. Then, slowly, the gossip moved on because offices are basically aquariums with dental insurance. But the biggest consequence happened at home. Noelle and I had the fight we should have had months earlier. It was a Sunday evening. Rain tapped against the patio door, and Murphy slept under the kitchen table with his head on one of my slippers. Noelle had made soup. I had burned grilled cheese, which is impressive because it has 2 ingredients and 1 job. We ate quietly for a while. Then she said, I need to say something, and I don't want you to treat it like the problem is over because Marin is gone. I put my spoon down. Okay. She looked tired. Not angry exactly. Tired in a way that made my chest hurt. You kept choosing the least uncomfortable option, and I paid for it. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I had not cheated, had not lied, had not wanted any of this. I wanted to point out that I had filed the concern, found the evidence, faced the meeting. But she was right. I had treated Noelle's discomfort like a weather report. Noted, inconvenient, probably passing. I had waited for an outside authority to confirm what my wife had already told me. Something was wrong. I'm sorry, I said. She watched me carefully, like she was waiting for the paragraph after the apology. I did not give one. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove disrespect was real before I took it seriously, I said. I'm sorry I cared more about being seen as easygoing at work than making you feel protected in public. You should not have had to sit there at that picnic and wonder whether I was going to choose your dignity or the room's comfort. Noelle's eyes filled. She pressed one hand over them, like she was annoyed at the tears for showing up. That hurt worse than the joke, she said. I know. No, Blake. I need you to really know it. I do. We sat there with the soup cooling between us and the rain making soft ticking sounds against the glass. Then she nodded. It was not a movie moment. There was no swelling music, no perfect line that fixed everything. We cleaned the kitchen. I threw away the burned edges of the sandwiches. Murphy woke up and tried to steal a napkin. Noelle graded essays at the table while I sat across from her and sorted receipts for our budget. But something had shifted because I stopped trying to make the conversation end quickly. A few months later, The company rolled out new approval controls, mandatory screen locks, shorter authentication windows, better workstation timeout rules, conflict of interest refreshers that everyone suddenly paid attention to. The compliance training was still boring, but nobody joked through it anymore. The work wife jokes disappeared almost overnight. Not because HR banned the phrase, though they probably wanted to. They disappeared because everyone had watched one stupid little nickname turn into a formal investigation, a frozen vendor contract, a firing, and the most uncomfortable vendor review of the year. Noelle and I are okay now. Not in a movie way. Not in a we never fight and everything made us stronger way. We are okay because I stopped acting like avoiding conflict was the same thing as being kind. I also stopped letting people borrow pieces of my marriage for office entertainment. One afternoon, months after everything settled, I was in the break room heating up leftovers while two newer employees talked near the sink. One of them laughed and said, "She's basically my work spouse at this point." The whole room went quiet. He looked around, confused for half a second, then seemed to understand he had stepped on an old bruise. "Yeah," he said, backing away from the joke. "Okay, never mind." No one lectured him. No one had to. I took my food out of the microwave, went back to my desk, and locked my screen before I walked away again to grab a fork. That was enough. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.